coast across northern Britain. Although this is impressive, in size it is dwarfed by the complex of fortifications making up what we know as the Great Wall of China, which was also in use for far longer than the mere 3 centuries or so of Hadrian's Wall. The wall lay on the fringe of Roman Britain, itself on the fringes of the Roman Empire, the frontiers of which ran for thousands of miles, along great rivers, through mountains and deserts. Hadrian's Wall was one small component of the empire's border control and defence, and rarely would it have occupied the thoughts of the emperors who ruled this vast empire. All this is true, but the wall is still special because it is unlike any other Roman frontier. Nowhere else were the defences so elaborate or monumental in scale. Nor is there so much archaeology to see in so small an area. In a way, the wall figures larger in our sense of the Roman world than it surely did to the Romans, much as provincial and rather vulgar Pompeii and the more sophisticated Herculaneum have shaped our ideas of Roman city life and art because of the catastrophe that led to their remarkable preservation. Because so much of the ancient world is lost forever, the sites that survive often assume far greater importance than they ever possessed when they were living communities. In 1987, Hadrian's Wall was named a UNESCO World Heritage Site, incorporated into the broader Frontiers of the Roman Empire World Heritage Site in 2005, which acknowledged its importance. Over 90% of it is now invisible on the ground, and yet, even so, it is the largest of the many monuments left by the Roman Empire and one of the most famous. It is also one of the most frequently visited, drawing people to walk the Hadrian's Wall path or look at the excavated remains of forts and the wall itself. If it lacks the intimate detail and dramatic story of Pompeii and Herculaneum, or the obvious history and importance of Rome itself, or the spectacles of theatres, amphitheatres, temples, or aqueducts dotted around the old empire, still tens of thousands come every year to see it. Most go to the central sector, where more of the wall is exposed, and it snakes across a landscape of dramatic ridges and crags. It is very rare to see a photograph of other sections of the wall, so people are usually surprised to learn that for most of its length it crossed gentler rolling countryside, or that in the far west its last few miles ran close to the sea along the shore of the Solway Firth. The wall itself was also part of a much larger network that included military bases, towns, and roads to the north and south, and military installations along the Cumbrian coast in the west. Because it was occupied by the Romans for the best part of 300 years, generations of soldiers and civilians, of provincials and local peoples, lived their lives on and around the wall and the broad military zone it created. In most people's minds, the purpose of any wall is fairly simple, especially one of the sheer size of Hadrian's Wall. A wall is a barrier, dividing one side from the other, and for many the idea persists that it was built to keep the Scots out, or Picts, for those with slightly more sense of history. Hadrian's Wall can be seen as the end of the empire, where civilization stopped and barbarism began, although today's fashionable hostility to empires no doubt will incline many to sympathize more with the so-called barbarians. Archaeologists know that the truth is different, and a good deal more complicated, but they will also admit that there is much about the wall, its purpose and its operation, that we do not understand. Only a tiny fraction of the literature of the ancient world has survived into the modern era. These texts mention Hadrian's Wall no more than a handful of times, and the sole surviving statement about its purpose claims that Hadrian built the wall to separate the barbarians from the Romans. The comment is brief and was written down some 200 years later by an author notorious for his inaccuracy and inventions, so that it is a sign of the extreme poverty of sources that we make use of it at all. It is only in recent years that we have evidence that it may indeed have been named after the emperor who ordered its construction, although using his family name Aelius rather than Hadrianus. The Vallum Aelium, or Wall of Aelius, kept this name for only a generation or so, and afterwards was simply called the Vallum. Hadrian's Wall can only be understood by examination of its physical remains, backed by inscriptions.